Bonjour, bonjour à tous.
Hello, everyone.
On attend une petite minute le temps que tout le monde entre dans la réunion.
We
Vous
will
êtes
wait another minute or so until everyone
nombreux.
is in the meeting. There are many of you coming in.
Hop, je vois encore quelques personnes dans la salle d'attente.
Still have a few people in the waiting room.
Allez, on va y aller. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this workshop. I will start now by saying that there is interpretation, live interpretation, French, English. You can therefore click on the globe at the bottom of the screen and choose the language which you like, French or English. I believe all our speakers will be speaking French.
Moi, je vais parler en français.
I'm therefore going to be speaking French. Welcome to this workshop on education and training to climate change in Africa, which is taking part as part of the African Climate Change Summit 2021, which is a virtual summit. We were to be in Dakar this week. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we were not able to do so. Therefore, we have this virtual meeting, and we will be in Dakar hopefully next year. For those of you who might not know about climate change, this is an association based in Paris that is putting together in a network the various NGOs, non-state actors in order to fight against climate change. We organize every year summits, and we also have a coalition to gather all the stakeholders and to try to raise some projects to fight against climate change. This day, we are talking about education and training to climate change in Africa. We had other workshops today. There will be more workshops tomorrow. So do not hesitate to visit our website and look at our program for tomorrow's sessions. Now, regarding the Education and Training Coalition, some of you are familiar with this coalition. Others are maybe finding about it. It was created in 2018 in Abidjan during the African Summit, Climate Change Summit. And so far, we can say that this coalition has really been the basis of all the coalitions, which is all about sharing best practices, sharing information. And there is a mailing list which you can join when you are part of this coalition. And you can exchange on updates and news. This will continue to go on. And you can continue to share your news, share best practices. After 3 years, we would like for this coalition to take a step further, which is why, and this will be the purpose of our workshop today. Why now? First of all, this is a coalition which has a lot of support from our co-pilot, the African Network for Sustainable Cities in Cameroon, the Youth Organization for Sustainability, Climate, etc. These are co-pilots which are of a great support. They've always been there during our events, and we know we can rely on them. This year, we have also published in partnership with the Glenna publishers a book called Mission Climate to explain climate change to children. On our website, you can find that, Glenna. Finally, there's always been a regular discussion this year also with Marfou Diouf, the Director for Research and Innovation, who is here with us for this webinar. And we would like to make sure that this coalition can take it a step further. The purpose of this workshop, therefore, is to identify best practices, needs, models, good models for the area of education and training in Africa and the African continent, and also better define the role that this climate change could take in the future. Therefore, we're going to have several times during this workshop, we're going to have some feedback for the first half hour, some experiences from the pitch corner, which you can find on our website, with over 50 climate initiatives, which you can hear about. That's going to be the first half hour of our workshop, with some presentations and feedback, and the presentation of climate David from Climate Something, a project in Latin America. And then after that time, there will be a time of sharing, discussion. We will have 3 subgroups in order to have a more participative time so that we can really find out more about the needs, the actors involved in the area of education and training to climate change in Africa. Therefore, I will have Sandrine with me, alongside me, my colleague. She will be helping me to moderate this group. And finally, we will have some feedback restitution of this workshop. During the workshop, you can always post questions, comments through or via the chat. So straight away, I will give the floor to Marfou Diouf, Director for Innovation, so that he can tell us a bit more about AIDE Action and the strategic and the strategy for this association. Thank you. AIDE and Action is the name of the association. We cannot hear you.
Alors, tu es en mute. Ah, voilà. Ah, tu es encore en mute, pardon.
C'est bon?
C'est bon.
Yes. Thank you very much, Samuel. It won't take long. The purpose is just to introduce the challenges that we're facing, and that would lead us to think about such a project of education and training to climate change. AIDE and Action is an NGO, international NGO, in the area of training and education in West Africa, and also in Southeast Asia and South Asia, then Indian Ocean area. We have about 80 to 100 projects going on, focused on education and training. Why such a topic for education and training for climate change? Because, as you know, education is a way to transmit know-how, knowledge for sustainable choices. If we're talking about climate change, we cannot avoid the educational aspect. It's key as far as we are concerned. Education also is also a way to be emancipated and to change the world in which we live. Climate change represents one of the key issues. We all agree that we have to do something. What does it mean? It means also understanding what is at stake around this issue of climate change. So how can we lead such
sociétés plus résilientes face aux risques climatiques.
how can we develop such action? There are also other challenges, and in order to help the population face these changes, mainly to involve the children who are key players for change. If we want to change behaviors, attitudes, we need to start with children, even the smaller children, the younger children, all the way to university. This is absolutely key. Education can be a lever for deep change, what I just said, to change behaviors. And this is necessary to adaptation and mitigation of climate change. Another element, education, can also help to prepare for risk reduction. Education can help to address the risk management, or how to face natural hazards, how to preserve the environment, and how to change. Every day we can see the sign of climate change. We can see difficulties linked to climate change, and if we do not act today because of what we are seeing, then what will happen? And we think that schools could become real resources centers for local population in order to communicate about practices and for adaptation and mitigation. These are the reasons really which are motivating us to be committed to get involved in training and education for climate change. These are pictures of some of our experiences, for example, in Benin, in Togo. And I thank you, really. I was trying to be as concise as possible to you, the 3 minutes I was given. Thank you very much. So now we will move on to another time of feedback with two feedbacks following our call for contributions, which you can find in the pitch corner on our website. I will now give the floor, or I will rather now show a video, Planet Education, and then Marine Plessis will tell us a bit more about this project. I'm going to share my screen to show you this video. Since the beginning of its creation in Benin, Planet Emergency has noticed the following events: pollution, deforestation, plastic, difficulties often connected to human activity, and a lack of education. Planet Urgence and Yima Benin NGO are convinced that we can all contribute to changing things, whatever our age. The purpose of this project is to make local actors more autonomous, and it's being implemented following three axes: building up capacity, developing tools, training teachers, raising awareness with children, educational workshops, activities, planting trees, integrating education for environment in syllabus, developing best practices, doing advocacy. After this pilot scheme, we will continue with other programs, support our NGO Planet Urgence.
Hop, j'arrête le partage d'écran pour laisser la parole
Now I will give the floor, Marie-Christine. Marine Plessis, you work for this NGO Planète Urgence. Yes, indeed. Hello, everyone. I'm Marine Plessis from Planète Urgence to tell you about our action axis 1 and 3, train teachers, equip teachers. We are working with our Benin partner that is raising awareness about environmental issues. And we have come to realize that even though there is a political willingness from the teachers regarding sustainability, we don't always have the necessary tools or the needed tools or the capacity for facilitating these animations or workshops. So therefore, we have worked with our Benin and a French partner specialized in education. And we have worked on developing guides focused on environmental, where children can understand what is going on and also adapt it to the social context to be relevant. This was very important for us to do that. We did this also with the academic inspection, which has been a key partner in this project. We did not want to do something else that was already done by local authorities. So we wanted to make sure we were coming with something new and something needed by building capacities, both of our partner and of the teachers. The third axis, which is sharing good practices, we are convinced that there are many initiatives, local initiatives, which are not always aware of one another. For example, we have met several people during our survey. We wanted to make sure people could talk between one another, talk to teachers, for teachers to get to know each other and talk to each other. And this project would also help them to be more in touch with one another so that they can share good practices, best practices, some advice, some feedback, and help one another. And also to advocate this project to the authorities. There is a willingness, but not always a necessary means to carry it out. As I agree with what was saying our previous speaker, we have to start at an early age with young children to bring changes by raising awareness about biodiversity, climate change. This is why I'm glad to be part of this workshop, so that I can answer questions, but also to try to stimulate some initiatives so we can work hand in hand together for education and training for climate change. Thank you very much. We are totally in that same spirit. Thank you for your feedback on this. Now, we will look at a second video following our call for contribution. Mr. Fall, are you here with us to talk about Green Campus project in Dakar? I don't see him. We will still share the video now as planned, and maybe he will not be here to comment on this, but at least we will be able to get an idea of what is being done through that association. This is the University of Dakar.
Le directeur Magasin, dès sa nomination à la tête du Centre des œuvres universitaires de Dakar, a créé pour la première fois.
We have created for the first time a department called the Department of Environment. This department is divided in two services. First service is cleanness, talking about waste. This service is there to clean campuses. We also have the Department of Green Spaces Management.
Le directeur a assigné au département de l'environnement, nouvellement créé,
This is a new department and that has been assigned with a mission to preserve hygiene and manage wastes.
mais aussi nous avons un plan de
Also, we have a plan for preservation and green spaces management.
Nous avons aussi des objectifs.
We also have goals. The director has some objectives to have a green campus. Our objectives is also sanitation and hygiene on all our campuses, waste management, and the certification.
Toutes ces réalisations contribuent à la lutte contre le réchauffement climatique au Sénégal et en Afrique.
Voilà donc pour le centre universitaire,
This for the University of Dhaka with the project of a green campus with a new environmental department. Mr. Fall, I think, is not here with us. Therefore, we move on to the next presentation from David, Director, Office for Climate Education, and he will talk to us about the ALEC project in South America and all that Office for Climate Education is doing. David, the floor is yours. Thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you for your invitation. I'm glad to be here with you today. I will talk to you about the many challenges regarding climate change education as part of our project in South America, Latin America. I'm David Wilgenbus, the Director for the Office for Climate Change Education. Just to tell you that at the end, you can have access to the PowerPoint and you can have here a list of all the links and to reach our resources.
Donc, on est tous d'accord.
We all agree on the necessity to do something about climate change, whether it be decision makers or public at large. There is a necessity. We've seen the Article 12 Paris Agreement through climate change and education IAP to support the educational world. We see it through various through the SDGs in this international context, which is very much in favor of rolling out education for climate change. When we look into detail, not much is happening actually on the field in practice. This is a recent study from the UNESCO. When it comes to general approach, awareness to global warming, etc., much is being done for public awareness, but pretty much everyone is doing that. But for the educational part, is not so developed compared to the other sectors. So in school, there isn't really that much going on. Another way to look at it, rather than look at institutional reports, is to look at the results of field actors. I'm actually working with another network called Eco Schools in France. and in the world, they are present in a lot of countries. These eco schools have to implement new projects every year, and they have to explain on which topic they're going to be working on. Last year, in 2020, you can see here the distribution of the various topics like waste, solidarity, health, energy, etc. But only 2% of the eco school work on the climate issues. What is mostly popular is waste, biodiversity, and like typical topics. So why are these topics chosen, and why is climate change not so popular? That's what I'm trying to show now. Why is so difficult about education for climate change? Why so few rather programs, so few teachers? One of the main difficulties, which is not so true in Africa, but very much so in Europe and in the West, is that many people do not feel concerned. As you can see on this map, the more you live in a country that has gas emission, the less you feel concerned by climate change, which is quite a paradox. But in Africa and Latin America, we do not have a lot of emissions, but we bear a lot of the consequences, and we feel more concerned. In the Western world, this is definitely a barrier. Teachers don't necessarily see the need to talk about this. This is not so much the case anymore these days, however. Another difficulty is a societal difficulty. At least last year, but even in the previous years, we have seen the youth really rising up, and teachers may feel a little ill at ease because the students are really taking this on board. This could be seen as a move of activists, and the school is not so much a place to do that, because a school is for education. And some teachers may not feel quite comfortable with these issues, and they may see this as a controversy. That's a second barrier. Others are more didactics, such as the fact that climate change is actually a complex subject, even for teachers who think they know about this topic. I think I've done about 500 trainings, training school teachers, university teachers on the issue of climate. I can tell you that 3/4 of them, even those who thought they knew about this, don't actually know the topic very well. This is a very simple survey that was done among teachers in France who are fairly well trained, but they were asked to connect climate change to a possible cause. And only 13% of the response were connecting climate change to CO2 emissions. So many teachers know that there is global warming, but don't necessarily know why. Some thought it was about pollution, and they don't always see the connection because this topic was never really taught at school. So they don't really know the topic really well. That's another barrier or hindrance, if you like. Another problem is that climate change is both a large scale and a long-term issue. It's something that's global with local manifestations, yet it is a global event, which is running in the long term. When we talk about waste management, when we work on this, it's very much easier to see the result. You can see straight away the result, but with climate, it's more long-term. It's something that you may see over decades. It's more difficult to apprehend for students, for children. It's easier to see short-term results with in other sectors. Finally, another hindrance, which should not be neglected in the educational programs or syllabus, and even in practices, education to climate change is not very well defined. Even the objective, the goals of education to climate change are not well defined. Some think we need to focus on understanding, knowledge of climate science. Others may think that we need to act at school to educate children. Others may think that what matters is really developing critical thinking. And others think it's a little bit of everything. So at the end of the day, in this international context, what people are saying is good education would be this and that or the other, but that does not actually exist. It's a kind of a discipline, if you like, that is not well defined and that is causing a number of issues, which mean that teachers are not comfortable with this. There are other systemic hindrances. The fact that the climate change issue is non-existent in some of the syllabus. You can see here, following a recent survey, in green, climate change shows very little. Okay, we have a moderate presence or mediocre presence of climate change in the syllabus. The great majority is either very low or non-existent in the green. Because it is not present in the syllabus, there are no educational tools and therefore no training or little training for the teachers. Of course, this is causing some important issues. Teachers have difficulties justifying that they have to teach something that is not part of their syllabus. And one last issue, which actually can be an opportunity, that climate change is a long-term issue. We're not talking about things that we're going to solve next year. We know that in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, we will still be talking about this. And changing practices takes time. In all the countries, you do not change practices one day to the next. It takes time, usually 20 years, 10 years before you can do so. So this is a topic that will be there with us for a long time, which doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing anything, of course, but we need to start now because they will take time. So what can we do? I will try to give you some feedback. I will mix both feedback and some experiences, and also some feedback from surveys. Mainly, I'm going to mix some results from 3 surveys from ALEC,
Fédération des académies des sciences dans le monde, qui se sont beaucoup penchés sur cette question. Bon, la première chose, c'est que
So the first thing is that awareness raising about COVID is good, but the most important thing to come out of this is education at school. We'll all agree with that here. But we need to point this out. And what comes out of all these surveys as well is that even if climate change is a complex issue, we need to start right from primary school, right from the very earliest age. Key players in this are the teachers. So if we really need to invest somewhere, well, it's in the teachers. Training teachers, supporting them, making educational tools available for them. Maybe something you are less aware of, or for some of you anyway, is the controversy which we still have in the climate change arena today. And the way of resolving this is basing our work on the IPCC reports, which is seen as the most impartial source and most up-to-date source of information in the issue of climate change. And this is also something that came out in a strong way, is that to teach climate change, we need to do that in an active way. So scientific investigations, working on analysis, critical analysis, working on projects in the nature of science. There's no one standard program for this, but these are just recommendations that you see in various places. And finally, something else which is important that came out of this is that, of course, it's important to look at the origin of the phenomenon, but we also need to spend time working on the solutions, particularly adapting to this and mitigating this. Not just about developed countries which emit a lot of carbon. We're not going to ask children in Benin to work on that. We're going to be asking French or American children to work that. But in Africa, what's important is to, at school, to look at adapting, because despite our efforts, climate change will happen and we need to adapt to this. And what we need to bear in mind right from the beginning when we have these kind of projects is insisting on solutions. We know that this is a bit of a perverse effect, but this increases anxiety. And we talked today about eco-anxiety. So we're creating a kind of anxiety among young people linked to this uncertain or not very positive future. And that's why it's important to work on solutions rather than working on the phenomenon themselves. I'm going to talk to you about a project called ALEC very quickly, which is Latin America through climate education. This is a 5-year project which has just begun. It began during the pandemic, so it's not maybe the best time to start an international project, but that's how it was. We're in the 2nd year of the project now, and this project is something which affects 4 different countries, so 2 main ones, Mexico and Colombia, and 2 secondary countries, Chile and Peru. Has a budget of 4 million euros over 5 years. There are 12 partners, and the OCE is the coordinator of the project. So we'll be looking for the funding. We bring the partners together, but most of the stakeholders in this project are local stakeholders in Latin America. OCE is just the French partner of the project. And the aim of this project is to reach out, do outreach work with 15,000 classes. And that's something I think is important to have in mind when you have an operational project like that. You need to have the right target size. We can't do outreach work with all schools in our country. That's the role of the education ministry to do that. But ministries can't necessarily do what we do because they are not very agile in terms of innovation. So to develop new things, NGOs are much more relevant to do that than ministries, but ministries need to support this work, support innovation. And if this works, they can then roll that out on a wider scale. So there's no point in doing outreach work with hundreds of thousands of schools or pupils, but the scale of the project needs to be big enough so that we can know whether we can roll this out on a bigger scale. So doing a project with 10, 12 teachers is great at a small level, but it doesn't enable us to see whether this can be upscaled. So we need an intermediary scale with a few hundred teachers or a few thousand teachers seems to be a more relevant size for this project. That's the right size for me in any case. But everybody might have their own opinion about that. But that's my opinion. That if you aim for a few hundred different classes, that's about the right size. So a few recommendations in terms of building a consortium. The first one is to remain modest, not looking to put together an international project, 10 different countries, 3 partners per country. That just makes things overly complicated. Even if our project is simpler than what I was explaining, we've already faced the difficulty of having too many partners. So my advice would be to limit it to 1 or 2 countries, maybe 3 maximum. And then in each country, have 1 or 2, maybe 3 maximum in terms of partners. Because having more partners complicates the work. And the more partners you have, there's less money for each partner. So the money has to be sprinkled everywhere that way. So it makes us less efficient. And then the work can't be carried out properly. So it's better to be fewer. And of course, it's important to highlight local partnerships. It's great to have an international partner like OCE or others, but the key is local partnerships, and particularly NGOs, rather than ministries or great big universities. It's very important that they're aware to be able to provide expertise and solutions and to enable these projects to be rolled out on a wider scale and to support these projects. But it's not those ministries that are going to actually carry forward the project. So the key partners in such a project are NGOs, local NGOs. I was delighted to see the presence here of Aide because they're really the kind of stakeholder that can make a difference. Another piece of advice, which seems like nothing but is important, is when we start a project like that, it needs to be clear from the beginning what the objectives are. It's not just about the number of classes, but you've got to describe, what does training a teacher mean? Is it going to be 2 weeks, 2 days? It's not the same thing over 2 days and 2 weeks. It's not the same budget either. So it's important to agree at the beginning on the objectives. And this will come back anyway over the course when there's the distribution of the budget. If you've got one partner who trains a teacher over 2 hours and one who trains a teacher over 2 weeks, you're going to have difficulties there in terms of budget. Because we've had those kind of problems anyway. So it's just some feedback for you on our project. So that's just a summary from my perspective. Just as we saw earlier on. Active teaching, a multidisciplinary approach, spending time and effort on supporting and training teachers. Start by training teachers. And of course, working with local partners. And the last thing I wanted to say to you, and then I promise I will stop. The last thing, it's not just about working on the content. So what the teacher is going to do in their class, that's one part. It's a very important part, maybe the most important part, but it's just one aspect of the issue. There are other aspects which are just as important, which is school governance, the community partnerships. If we want to do climate change education, we need to involve communities, parents, local authorities, and so on. So that's something that we need to bear in mind from the beginning. So that's all I wanted to share with you. It's just feedback from our experience, from our perspective in Europe or in Latin America. We don't have any operational projects in Africa for the moment. We would like to. We'd like to join local partners in that. But there are a certain number of things that we need to be aware of in this kind of project. These projects are difficult to implement, so we must be aware of these things. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you very much, David, for this general framework and your feedback, which was very informative on the project ALEC. And we wish you all the best and much success. I have a question in the chat that maybe you can answer straight away. Abdi Benis is asking whether governments and ministers involved are convinced themselves about climate change education, and do we need to start with advocacy work with decision makers? So why the OC has started working in the field rather than working on advocacy work on a more systemic level? So several reasons for that. It's a very good question. And we've asked ourselves that question several times. There are two ways of answering that. Firstly, these are projects which are difficult. So we don't want to add more difficulty to them. So if we need to start one of these projects, we want to do it in a favorable environment. So we tend to work with countries where There's not necessarily strong willingness, but there's a beginning of that. So we're not swimming against the tide. That's very important. The local institutions need to accept this. And it also needs to be accepted by families. So we carried out a study throughout Latin America on the evolution in mindsets, educational programs. We didn't go to places where it was perfect, because otherwise there'd be nothing to do there. So we went to places where we saw there was something that we could do. There was something we could do to take action. And we needed support from the local authorities that we couldn't go against them. So these stakeholders are not going to roll out these projects. It's not their role. They're not going to be the ones who are innovating. But if they are against you, you can't do anything. So they need to support you. They need to be involved in the project, but they're not going to operationalize the project. Thank you very much for your answer. We're going to move on to the second part of this workshop now. So we will be dividing into 3 subgroups for discussions, so we can digest these presentations by David, as well as Planet Urgence. So I'd like you to try and think about what the requirements are in terms of climate change education in Africa. Who are the key stakeholders in this area? Interesting to talk about that. And then secondly, see what role the Climate Change Education Coalition can have in Africa. So you are able to enter one of the discussion groups. There are 2 which will be French speaking and 1 which will be English speaking. So make sure you choose the right group in terms of your language. So yeah, we can send you to those groups.
Hello, everyone. You should be seeing 3 groups on your screen right now. In the breakout room option, or in French, it should be called diviser en groupe. Please select the group according to your language. Group 1 is going to be in French. Group 2 is also going to be in French. Group 3 is going to be in English. All the groups are going to discuss the same questions. It is just a matter of language. If you're connected from a laptop, please look for the option that says breakout room on the bottom of your screen, or diviser en groupe if your computer is in French. If it's on your mobile phone, look for a similar icon with 4 little squares that say diviser en groupe or join a breakout room.
Tanya?
Oui.
Can you hear me? Because I'm clicking on room 3,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing's happening.
I'll try adding you. If you're having difficulty joining one of the groups, please let us know in the chat which language you would prefer.
I'm not in. So everyone can unmute, because this is, again, the goal is to participate and exchange. So that's what we're recommending. I see still a few people with the mic on. No? Okay, welcome everyone. I don't know if I should start, but anyway, I just gonna quickly introduce myself. My name is Sandrine. I actually recently joined Climate Change about 3 months ago and I'm an intern, but I used to be a teacher myself. And I worked in education for about 16 years, and starting 2005, I even created an entire unit on climate change to teach my middle school students about cause and effect of climate change. And of course, back then, as you heard David earlier, I was the only one in the school and faced a lot of pushback. I just want to remind again, this is in the region. So at this point, I'll be a listener, but I'm very eager to engage with anyone who's working, of course, in climate change education in Africa. Unfortunately, it seems that we don't have many participants in this group. Yeah, it's a little bit quiet. Yes, unfortunately. So,
maybe. I don't know
Luigi.
if you hear. Oh,
yes,
yeah.
yes, I can hear you.
Everybody, yeah. I'm talking from Kenya. Just a brief introduction so we can network. I am professor, now visiting professor at the University of Nairobi, international coordinator of the International University Network on Cultural and Biological Diversity. Our focus is on biodiversity, but of course, our focus is also on climate change. And our perspective is very, very clear. We follow international and multi-level policy. We follow the multilateral environmental agreements and their policy agendas. Coming to the main issue, climate change in Africa, from our point of view, it is a fundamental an integrated approach to climate change and environment. An integrated approach to climate change and biodiversity issues, as well as other environmental issues. Education is an holistic sector, a transdisciplinary sector, when we discuss about environment and development and sustainability. Take into account our strategy and methodology, action plan, it's very clear, linking education, science, policy, and society, communities. And within this framework, another pillar is the integration between teaching, research, and outreach activities, with more than a transdisciplinary point of view. It is a long life learning process, and we want to open the gates of universities to society policy making in order to establish a dialogue. So take into account this framework. Of course, we can discuss in details about curricula, about actions, about the very detailed climate change issues. But I suppose it is very useful, first of all, to discuss about educational methodologies and strategies. This is the reason why I wanted to present our methodology strategy in order to share with you our thinking and, of course, jointly develop more and more. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sorry, is your name Gabrielle?
Yes, Gabrielle, yeah.
Okay, because I can't, for some reason, okay. Okay, well, because according to what David presented earlier, we obviously saw that there was a need to train teachers for schools. I'm sorry if I'm gonna Botsi, see. I'm assuming, I mean, if I understood correctly, you're mostly working at a university level and at a higher level for policymaking, right? So the goal here in this discussion really was to, try to share, but obviously we don't have as many participants as we should, in order to open the discussion on a larger extent to what can be done on the ground in Africa, and to really identify the needs on the ground, and sharing best practices, if any. And David stressed the importance of teaching, providing early education on climate change. Does university provide anything, thinking of including such plans?
I wanted to emphasize one perspective. When we discuss about the university, we discuss about a very important faculty of university. And this faculty is the Faculty of Education. The entire framework of training teachers in primary school, secondary school, and tertiary school and higher education is framed by the Faculty of Education in the university. So when we discuss about the university, we don't discuss also about the curricula of universities. We discuss about education, the educational sector. So it is very, very important to address these issues with this point of view. Our discussion, not a discussion for primary schools. Of course, the teachers are very, very important and they should participate in these discussions. But we know very well, this one is an academic discussion at the university level. So this one is the perspective, very holistic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Apparently, I'm reminded that we have about less than 10 minutes for our discussion. And the second part of our discussion was supposed to be approaching the idea of how the Education Coalition within Climate Chance can be of support, and what role it should take. Do you have anyone has any thought on that? Are you familiar with our Education Coalition?
Well, I was actually just going to ask if I know you said you've been at the Climate Chance for a few months. Would you mind just kind of sharing some of the key points?
I'm going to try. Climate Change has about eight or nine different African coalitions on different themes, and one of them is education. So as a reminder, the goal of Climate Change as an NGO is to really build a network, put everyone in connection with one another. So it's really the role of sharing best practices, helping each other, in building this network of support and sharing of knowledge. So at this point, of course, you can be added on the mailing list if needed, and then from that point on, be in contact and share information. But unfortunately, we would have expected a lot more. Maybe the other two groups have a lot more people in them. But so the exchange would have been interested to find out what other people would think about how the coalition can be helpful. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat, but I'm not sure if it's for us. So sure, someone would like to jump in.
Hi, Sandrine, it's Tanya.
Yes, Tanya.
Yeah, so talking about the coalition, I think we could probably take a moment to talk about the coalition's roadmap. So each of the coalitions at Climate Chance actually has a roadmap which drives the action of the coalition. And this roadmap is divided into 3 main sections, which is where are we now, where do we want to go, and how do we get there? So the part that is where are we now actually deals with the current state of things, while the section where do we want to go lays out the goals for the coalition. And the main aim of this workshop and these working groups is to sort of eke out or flesh out the details for the third part of the roadmap, which is how do we get there. So I could definitely share the coalition's roadmap right now in the chat if you'd all like to take a look. But I see that we have about 3 minutes left for the group work. And I also see Douglas, who has joined us. If you'd like to jump in and say something while I look for the roadmap.
Your microphone is muted. Douglas, if you can hear us, you're on mute. I guess no luck there. Okay, well, we're probably going to be cut off, so hopefully you'll get the link. Thank you, Tanya, for clarifying things up for me and for everyone else. I guess Tanya will be also able to tell you how to get in touch and be connected to the Education Coalition.
Definitely, we will add all of your addresses to the coalition's mailing list. So I see that we have about 2 minutes left. So I'm quickly going to share the roadmap so that we can have at least a fruitful discussion around that in the next part, which is the restitution.
There you go. The link is there now.
So you should be able to see my screen.
The link is in the chat, yes. Yeah.
So yeah, this is the first part that just lays out the state of things versus the second part, which has the goals of the coalition. And the third part is how do we get there? And this is what we're working on. We have a coalition that has nearly 500 members now. And the idea is, like some of the speakers said earlier in the session, to get these project leaders and the members of the coalition in touch with each other so that they can share their experiences and benefit from the best practices. And this is what we're focusing on right now with this workshop, is to identify concrete projects that this coalition can work on. So yeah, this is a summary of the coalition and its roadmap. If any of you have comments to make on this in the next minute, that the floor is yours.
Sorry, just one question to align my thinking. Please, in a few words, the objective of the coalition. I read about the coalition. I heard about the coalition, but in few words, the objective of the coalition.
The objective of the coalition is to gather all of the non-state actors in Africa working in the space of climate change education and training to be able to come up with concrete action, with concrete projects in consortium with local actors and with community involvement.
Thank you so much. So the objective is the design and development of projects.
Yes,
knowledge sharing.
To federate, if that's the right word, the different members of the coalition who are sort of throughout Africa, so that we can join our forces for
in the knowledge, I guess, in the knowledge sharing of best practices, and hopefully be able to replicate them in wherever they are.
Yes, exactly. And so the we can say, correct me, please, and the time now. So I am very happy to provide the contributions, to provide support, to disseminate your initiative. Because this one is our mission, and I am very happy to align our thinking. We can discuss more because there is no time, and we can share documents maybe. But in one word, the main goal of the coalition is, of course, the improvement, the enlargement of climate change education in Africa.
For this coalition,
the parallel objective, the goal is exactly the development.
Donc on n'a pas fini, mais bon, on a presque abordé l'essentiel des sujets.
Ok, bon. Ce qu'on va faire, c'est que dans chaque sous-groupe, alors je ne sais pas si vous avez déjà désigné dans chaque sous-groupe quelqu'un pour faire une restitution, ou si c'est le modérateur ou la modératrice qui s'en charge. On fait donc une petite restitution de pas plus de 3.
So we're going to do some feedback from each group, no more than 5 minutes, about what has been said. So we're going to start with the first subgroup. I think I took notes, so it's up to me to feedback.
Je pourrais me compléter au besoin.
Oui. J'espère en tout cas que je vais restituer ce qui a été dit dans notre groupe.
I hope I'll feedback properly what we said in our group. We started by defining what was being set up. I differentiated between target audience, for example, teachers and pupils, and supporting teachers. And then we identified different networks of stakeholders, whether local authorities to help identify schools or ministries.
Après leur déclinaison décentralisée en fonction de comment ça se met en œuvre dans les différents pays.
Depending on how this is implemented in different countries. Communities as well, and parents of students.
Le secteur privé pour un peu,
as well as the private sector, to try and raise awareness, because there are often impacts on the environment and on climate. So to raise awareness about these issues. In terms of requirements, the climate change education project included part on knowledge and skills. So how we can pass on these knowledge and skills, how we can give people tools and teaching tools which can be used, so it's not just theory, as well as places to experiment. How can we experiment with projects? Is it in schools? Do we create specific spaces for this? And finally, the need for financial resources, which is related to how the coalition can have a role to facilitate this. There's a part of mapping as well, and networking, how we can work together, how we can discuss things more together, how we can share our experience and best practice better together, how we can highlight these things to capitalize on what other people are doing so we can duplicate or replicate those in our own countries, how the coalition can support member organizations to help them spot funding better and have access to this so they can develop their own projects. And the last point, which was important as well, which is about advocacy, how we can communicate better together so that this has a better impact on decision makers and governments, so that projects are then taken up on a national level and not just at a local level. So I think that was everything. That was very faithful to our discussions. I would just like to add the time that takes for colleagues to talk about this, because it's a process which is quite long, which takes time to be matured. So this process can last about 5 years, from the design and thought process to the implementation. So thank you very much, Marine. Thank you very much for your feedback. Would anybody from the English-speaking group like to feedback what they've talked about?
Bonjour à tous. Comme la majorité sont.
Hello, everybody. Because the majority of speakers are French-speaking, I'm going to speak in French. In the English-speaking group, there are very few of us, but people were very interested in the activities of the coalition and climate chance. And one of the participants worked at the Nairobi International University, whose focus is on biodiversity and climate change. And he talked about aligning the work of the university with multilateral agreements. And they are very interested in working with the coalition to unite our strengths. On the one hand, the university world, with the training of teachers, and that's where this work begins, to transmit information, to pass it on, to work with teachers, and to include climate change education in teacher training. I don't know whether Sandrine would like to add anything, or the other participants as well, maybe. Can you hear me? I thought my microphone was off. Anyway, if Monsieur Botti maybe would like to say something. We talked about the policy making, so we could work on this to make sure that policies can be set up at a certain level so that it can be transferred and applied. Would you like to add anything, Mr. Boudi?
I confirm your synthesis. It is very important to link, and this one is our action plan of the International University Network on Cultural and Biological Diversity. I am the international coordinator and visiting professor at the University of Nairobi. So linking education, science, policy, and society community. This one is our strategy and methodology, and our mission is to support a scientific, academic, voluntary support all the initiatives around education on climate change and biodiversity. It is an holistic approach. We need to approach climate change with the biodiversity perspective. We need to approach biodiversity issues with the climate change perspective, including all the other multilateral environmental agreements scope. International policy is very, very important because if we are discussing now here is because of international policy. It is an institutional value chain, and for example, all the donors study, first of all, the policy agendas, and second, they design their own policy. Just an example. Ministries of education, ministries of university, or Ministry of Science follow the national policy. The national policy is aligned with the international policy. So we should work on these issues. We work at the grassroots level, very, very grassroots level with the communities and students. At the same time, we follow the international United Nations meetings and agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for these very interesting remarks. Merci. Juste pour compléter sur.
So just to add to that, and what has been said in this group, people began by highlighting the importance of awareness-raising projects in schools among pupils, like planting trees, reforesting, which can create pleasant areas to be in. And this is the first way of raising awareness amongst children about trees, and maybe to talk about climate change with them after that, about recycling waste, recycling plastic, things like that don't necessarily have an impact in terms of greenhouse gases and CO2 reduction, but they may be first steps for children so that after they can start being interested in climate change issues. And secondly, we talked about the targets for this climate change education. We talked about who we should be training, teachers or teacher trainers who will be training teachers, or training elective representatives who may implement policies for climate change education and integrate climate change issues in their public policy. So this question was raised, which we will need to try to answer as part of our project with the Climate Chance Coalition. I see that Mr. Fall is here. Would you like to say something about the Green Campus project?
Oui, bonjour.
Hello.
Bonjour.
J'ai bien suivi le
I
débat.
have followed the debate. I had an issue of timing. I joined the meeting late, actually. Sorry about this. In 2-3 minutes, could you explain to us your green campus project? As you could see in the video, with the new director who created for the first time, developed for the first time a new department, Department of Environment. Now, more specifically, there is a service dealing with green spaces, management, vegetalization. The trees, as we all know, absorb carbon dioxide, CO2, gas, greenhouse gas, which contribute to the global warming. The same trees also produce oxygen, enabling us to breathe. In bearing this in mind, our university is also in the center of Dakar, and in a way we have been able to develop a green hub, green campus. In order to have a green campus, as I said earlier, we will therefore contribute to fighting against global warming. Dakar, with all the cars, all the industries, we try to create something that could at least participate in fighting against climate change. With our director, what we're thinking about is to develop a green campus, talking about green building, green surroundings, besides even trees, vegetalization. We are also thinking on developing solar energy. We want to use smart lights for the students. We're thinking about developing water supply and to collect rainfall in order to also develop green building. Thank you very much for that input. And good luck for the rest of your initiatives and your work to develop this green campus. We had many examples of such projects during the first time of this session and also in the discussions in our groups. It was really interesting to see the diversity of the profiles and the people who took part in this workshop. Thank you very much for your participation. I want to thank all our panelists who shared their experiences. Thank you very much to David for his presentation. That was really instructive. And he highlighted the challenges that this kind of projects can raise. I think we're going to conclude now. I wish you all a nice evening, and we will meet again tomorrow for the rest of the summit. Thank you to Gabrielle.
Merci à tous. Bonne soirée.
Thank you, everyone. Good night. Good evening.